All right, so let's get started. One hint that I would give you in a timed writing situation, sometimes it's easier to just kind of skip some space for yourself and then go ahead and write your thesis. You can always come back later and write an attention getter and a full introduction and things like that. But really, we don't always have time, especially if there is a time limit. So the most important thing is that I have a thesis in my introduction. So a lot of times I just suggest you skip some space on your paper and then kind of go from there. And actually, you know what I'm going to do before I get too far here? I am going to, nope, not that one. Add some lines to my paper because then I'll maybe write a little less chaotically. So this is how I'm going to write over here. And again, we are making the argument that college is worth the cost. I'm going to skip some lines and then I'm going to use my they say, I say format. So I'm going to say, although an increasing number of families are questioning the value of a college education, they overlook the financial gain, well, I'm going to say the financial and personal gains of a college education. Therefore, college is worth the cost. So very explicit thesis. This is the argument I'm going to make throughout the entire essay. All right, so my first claim was about financial, and I have two sources kind of figured out for myself. But I am going to use a counter argument. So primarily, the argument against college comes down to money. But over time, the cost of college becomes worth it as income increases. So the reason I started with this sentence is I kind of wanted to preview this idea that, like, yes, new graduates might not start off very well because I'm going to acknowledge and concede that with the chart, but then I'm going to refute it by this idea over time they will eventually be making $20,000 more possibly, so it's really worth it. The other thing I will point out to you, I'm again using very explicit words to make sure that everything is kind of connecting back to my thesis. So my first piece of evidence that I was going to use is the chart. So let's go down and get something specific from that. Since 2000, American young college graduates have seen wages drop. So I'm just going to paraphrase that because that's pretty straightforward. Between 2000, oh shoot, I forgot to see what year this chart goes up to 2010. Now this is kind of an older prompt, so it's a little bit hard to argue, and we know this is kind of already passed and probably changed. But so between 2000 and 2010, new college graduates saw a considerable decrease in wages. then the very first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to cite that source. Ooh, what letter is it? C. Always use the parenthetical, even if you do state it. So between 2000 and 2010, new college graduates saw a considerable decrease in wages. Obviously, this might put people, I don't want to use I was about to use like a colloquialism or like a slang. This might discourage people from enrolling in college. So what I've done in this paragraph so far is I've kind of set up that counterclaim, right? And every time we have a counterclaim, we're going to follow it with what I call the switch, or when we kind of switch to my argument. So I'm going to say, however is a good one. You can say nonetheless, regardless. Having that clear kind of switch word makes it very obvious that I'm going to refute this evidence that I just conceded. However, this does not consider the long term. While wages may increase and decrease, say increase and in this case decrease, over time, graduates have reported making, I gotta go down to my source F and check that number, what was it, 1955, 50, I was right, okay. Just keep scrolling, sorry, there we go. Have reported making 19,550 more than those, sorry, I'm going to zoom in again, than those with just a high school diploma. And then again, the first thing I'm going to do is put my source. In this case, it was from source F. So what I've done is I've established, some people say, there have been a decrease in wages, and then I had my switch. I said, however, this isn't the case, because ultimately people are reporting making much more on the census if they have that high school diploma. So I'm going to kind of summarize that connection that we just set up. In other words, always a good transition into commentary. Even, did I already say even though? I don't know. So, in other words, even though a new college grad may not make heaps of money, I'll say make much in wages, they must consider the fact that over time they are likely to make much more than their peers without a college degree. So I've kind of summarized that whole relationship between those two sources, and I'm going to kind of summarize it by connecting back to my claim and then say these long-term rewards, I like to kind of relate back to my previous sentence whenever I can. So these long-term rewards make college an investment that, what's the investment expression? I'm trying to think of it. It's like gains returns, or I'll just say that pays off. Making it worth the cost, or the initial cost. So again, I'm going to highlight these words that I'm using: worth, college. Again, making sure that all of my claims are going back to that initial thesis I started out with. All right, that's a pretty good paragraph. For my financial one, I have my counter argument worked into that one. My second claim that I was going to do is about leaving college more well-rounded, and then I have a couple sources. So my claim in this case, I'm going to say, this initial cost, again, I'm trying to create cohesion by relating back to what I just said before. So this initial cost of college is also worth it because graduates are more well-rounded and generally happy with their experience. Again, college, worth, cost, trying to keep it as consistent as possible when it comes to my claims. I can change it for synonyms later, but when I'm doing my claims, I want to be really explicit. So I said source B is something that I was going to use. Talking about how they're able to use their resources. I think it's down here. So they can use their existing resources. I think that's talking about generally. I'm just trying to pick out the quote. I think that's going to kind of summarize it the best. This one up here is about successful or leadership. Let's do that. Let's talk about how college graduates are more likely to find themselves in leadership positions. So I want to integrate, and then I'll go get part of that quote. For instance, college graduates, and then I'm going to go get my quote from source B, can be found disproportionately, and actually graduates was in there, can be found disproportionately and then I think it said leadership roles. Sorry to jump around like crazy. In leadership positions, okay. Fortunately, in leadership positions. And that is from source B. So essentially what I've done is I've provided evidence from source B. In this case, I want to kind of explain how this idea of leadership positions connects back to being a well-rounded person before I move on to a new piece of evidence. So, most would argue, oopsies, turn my pen on. Most will recognize, there we go, that people chosen for leadership positions are typically well-rounded, bringing both knowledge and character to their position. I mean, ideally. But I just wanted to explain, because all I said in my evidence was that, oh, people who go to college are leaders, but that hasn't really explained what that means, has to do with my claim, which is that they're well-rounded. So then my second piece of evidence, I believe, was from source F. And let's see what I took note of. Oh, yeah, I have these statistics. 74% say they would grow intellectually. 69 said they mature. So I'm going to paraphrase that because I don't think I need to put quite that much text. But if I go back to the essay, oh, there it is. Graduates of college also, put my transition in there, feel their experience helped them grow intellectually. And then I'm going to put the percentage, which I already forgot, but I think it was 74%. I can look back in a second. And mature. And that one was 69%. Ooh, I'm going to check that percentage before I get too far. Sorry if I'm jumping around like crazy. 74. So those percentages are correct, but I want to put my source F citation right there. So again, these graduates are not just talking about the fact that they learned a lot and that they were prepared for their job, but they're saying that they walked away from college smarter and more mature, meaning that it's more well-rounded other than just knowledge and facts. So these graduates demonstrate that while college made them smarter, it also provided an opportunity. I'm going to say provided a valuable opportunity. I'm adding that because value is one of the words in the task and in my thesis. It also provided a valuable opportunity to mature into adulthood. Good. So that kind of, again, links these two statistics about how they felt intellectually and mature, and again connects it back to it being valuable that they were well-rounded by giving them these other opportunities. I'm going to summarize. I want to link back to my thesis one more time, and I'll say because of this, and what do I mean by this? So because of this, actually I'm going to say because of the way college produces more well-rounded individuals, I don't want to necessarily use, no, I do want to use well-rounded. I want to make sure the link to my claim is explicit. Because of the way college produces more well-rounded individuals, leaders with maturity. I'm adding this little note in here because my first, supporting idea in this paragraph was about leadership, and my second is about maturity, so I'm going to put both of those in there. And I'll just end it with, it is worth the cost, meaning college is worth the cost. And again, I'm going to highlight cost, college, worth, just kind of pointing again, those yellow highlights are just how I'm connecting back, connecting back to this original thesis. All right, so now I'm going to kind of switch into my conclusion. It doesn't have to be fancy, especially in a timed situation. If you find yourself running out of time during an assessment in our class or on the AP exam, skip the conclusion. Work on making really good body paragraphs instead. But as I think about it, it's kind of easier to write a conclusion if I have an attention getter to kind of build to. So I'm going to go back up here. Remember, we skipped some space before our thesis so that we could kind of go back and add an attention getter. And I'm trying to think of things that might provide context. For right now, I'm going to talk about student loan debt and like how during COVID they canceled it. Well, they didn't cancel it, but they had to put it on pause because it was a financial burden, and now we're having the conversation about canceling portions of debt altogether. So I'm going to say in 2022, President Biden announced a plan to eliminate student loan debt for some borrowers. After years of feeling the effects of the COVID pandemic, this was seen as a huge financial relief to people struggling. Oops. I put struggling to pay for an expensive education. And then I think it'll work to go, although an increasing number is apparently questioning the value of the college education, they overlook the financial and personal gains of, yeah, that works, okay. So all I did for my introduction is I just built a little context. If you have any knowledge of current context that applies, historical context that applies, that's always a really good way to kind of start these essays. So if I go back down here, I want to connect back to that, but I also, more importantly, want to restate my thesis, possibly. So I'll just say it is no secret that the cost of college has become increasingly difficult to manage. To the point that the federal government has felt the need to intervene. Regardless, kind of doing that idea of the they say, I say in one longer conclusion paragraph, but regardless, college has immense value. Oops, that's not how you spell immense. Immense just means a lot. Immense value as it provides long-term financial security. I'll say financial advantages. And I'm trying to do my second point with a well-rounded, and I'll just say it makes individuals more So just a 2-sentence conclusion, but I kind of wrapped it all up, reviewed kind of what I said in this one statement, essentially took my original thesis and added some of the details I established in my argument. So I know for some people it might be helpful to break down the sample. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just go through what I did essentially. I'm going to make it a little bit smaller so I have room to do some notes over on this side. And I'm going to kind of do some brackets to kind of frame out what your outline should look like. And this is my attention getter, which sounds like something fancy and difficult you have to do for an essay, but really it just provides some context. In our first unit, we talked about this idea of broader context. This is a great place to bring that in for your reader. The rest is just my thesis with my they say part here, and then my I say down here, okay? But together they kind of establish my argument. So for your introduction, that's all you need. Attention getter context. If you have time, remember, this is the part that you can skip if you run out of time. If you, like I said, skip some lines, just write a thesis, because if you all you get is this thesis down here, you're still gonna have a passing essay, okay? As long as the rest of it's good too. So that's the breakdown for the intro. For my next paragraph, I have my claim. Again, remember, I'm using these words very intentionally because I want to be explicit and make sure my reader is kind of following my connections that I'm making, okay? Then I have my evidence from source 1, or from my first source. In this case, I'm doing a counter argument, right? Because this was the money one. Then right here, I have a little bit of commentary, but remember we talked about this is my switch because I have my however, and I'm going to switch into my second piece of evidence, which is in supporting my argument. And then I'm going to use to refute it. So I have evidence again from my second source, and this one is being used to refute. The rest of the paragraph, well, I shouldn't say the rest, but the next big chunk is my commentary. Well, actually, you know what? I'm going to redo my little bracket here because the whole thing is actually commentary. And I'll kind of do what I did before because the first thing I did was I linked to my claim. So I explained why does my evidence support the idea that college is going to make me more money. And then I linked that idea to my thesis, which is this part right here. I'll put little brackets within my brackets to make that clear. Okay? So that is one way to format your paragraph, where you go claim, evidence, provide more evidence, and then refute together. In this one down here, I have, again, claim number 2. And then from there, I go into evidence from my first source. First source in this paragraph, I should say. And then I have some commentary, actually, which I didn't do in the other one. Kind of took a break for some commentary here. And the purpose of this was to link to my claim. Because, again, I stopped here to explain how does this idea of a leadership position link to this idea of being well-rounded, which is in my claim up here. Then I provided evidence from another source. So second source for this paragraph. And again, the rest is all commentary. But again, right here in this first part, and this part right here, I linked my evidence to my claim, and then I linked my evidence to the thesis overall. Oops. I'm going to make little notes actually right here, because when I linked it to the thesis, those are the sentences that I marked with the yellow to show you how I was explicitly linking. All right, and then for, changed colors on you, sorry. For the conclusion, again, skip this if you don't have time, not a big deal. I kind of linked back to my context or my attention getter, and then I restated my thesis. And that's kind of a good outline. What I like about this is the first paragraph kind of shows, here's all, here we go. This first one shows, okay, here are all my evidence that I'm going to use, and then it goes into commentary, whereas this one does evidence, commentary, and kind of goes back and forth between the two of them. Both are great ways to do it. It kind of just depends on the evidence you have. I kind of feel it out as I go, and if I need to provide both pieces of evidence before I can really explain the connection before them, then I'll use this first method, or if I'm doing a counter argument. If I'm not, I'll use this second one where I do evidence explain, with a link back at the end. I hope this was helpful. Good luck as you're writing essays for question 1 for AP Language.